Hey guys, it's Caden. Welcome to another Autism Digest interview, where today we have another major name in the comedy stratosphere. You might know him from hosting the podcast Bullseye, where he regularly talks with comedians, and he's a father to two autistic daughters. He is the amazing Jesse Thorn. Thanks for coming on, Jesse.
Caden, two autistic daughters, one autistic son, three in total. Thank you for having me.
Of course. For those that may not know you, which might be a small majority, given you've interviewed several big names in comedy, do you mind telling a bit of your story in your own words?
Sure. I started my NPR show Bullseye, which is an arts and culture interview show, when I was in college and 19 years old at UC Santa Cruz, and have been doing it every week in the 25 now almost 26 years since. And along the way, I started podcasting at the very dawn of podcasting at the end of 2004. And at some point, I moved to Los Angeles from my hometown of San Francisco, started a podcast network called Maximum Fun. And it was sort of off to the races. So these days, I do the Bullseye show once a week, which airs on NPR stations as well as being podcast. And then I do the comedy podcasts, Jordan Jesse Go and Judge John Hodgman.
Well, that's definitely an impressive lineup. And as I was telling you before we start recording, I really like your interview approach. It's similar to mine, which transitions beautifully into my next question. What was it first like for you when you first found out your kiddos were on the spectrum?
It was a real surprise in a lot of ways. I mean, all three of my kids are what is sometimes called highly functional. Um, all these different bits of language obviously have different resonances for different people, but all three of my kids are verbal and very, very smart, and in many ways comfortable navigating the world. So it wasn't a situation where my oldest, my daughter Grace, was like 2 years old and we were like, oh, something's going on. She's not hitting these developmental milestones or something like that. Instead, it was that she was in school and they kept telling us that she was hitting her educational standards. She was meeting educational standards. But then they started sort of on the periphery telling us about behavior in class that suggested to us that there was something else going on. And it was a real challenge to get her regular neighborhood public school to deal with the idea that someone could be different in a significant way that required intervention, that required, special different help from the typical student, where that intervention wasn't just to kind of correct for a deficit. So I think in their mind, even in the comfortably into the 21st century, there was kind of like two types of kids. One was typical kids, and one was kids who, maybe had an intellectual disability. And it was very hard for them to conceive of what they call a 2E kid, a twice exceptional kid. So a kid who's very gifted, whose problem is not lacking intellectual capacity, but still needs special different support from what they would offer a more typical kid. And so when we figured out what was going on, first of all, they don't tell you. At least they didn't tell us, because it's a hassle to them and an expense to provide special services. It was a fight that took years to get the help that we needed. And that was a really scary process. But that having been said, I'm very aware of, as much challenge as all three of my kids face in the world, that is contributed to by their autism. I'm also aware that there are people with autism or autistic people who face much greater challenges than they do. And also, my kids are my kids. So, to a great extent, I'm just happy that I have such wonderful children that I love. You know what I mean? So yeah, we found out. Us finding out was like very interwoven with school experiences that were really challenging, and that we never quote unquote fixed. We never found the right school situation for them, and all three of my kids are homeschooled now. But it was both a huge surprise and no surprise at all. you know, we knew the kids. We knew that Gracie, our oldest, was different, and we just didn't know in what way. So we were glad to have some understanding of what was going on with her.
And I'm glad too. That's the type of stories we like to spotlight on here. Those who care about their kids genuinely as they are and are willing to fight for them. So I highly respect that. Which leads beautifully into my next question for you. How has being a parent to autistic children changed the way you think about communication, humor, and storytelling?
That's a great question. I mean, for one thing, it really changed the way that I thought about my own family and my own childhood. That is to say, my family outside of my wife and children. Um, when you have three different kids going in for neuropsych evaluations, um, you start to really learn a lot about the different ways that different people experience the world, especially people who are, especially people who are kind of as, I really say, like highly tuned as the members of my family. Our brains in my family are a little bit more of an Italian sports car than they are an American sedan. And so it really affected how I consider, like, I really struggled in some parts of school, and was always considered to be lazy by my teachers, sometimes by my parents, because I was so gifted according to tests, and was struggling just to get through a year of showing up and doing my homework. And my mother, when my oldest child was having a hard time, just casually mentioned to me one day, my daughter was maybe in second grade, first grade maybe. My mother said to me, "Well, I used to throw chairs in class." To be clear, my daughter had not thrown any chairs, but my mom's like, "I used to throw chairs in class." That was until I was 7 or 8. That was because of my encephalitis, though. It was my mother had survived a bout of encephalitis when she was very young. And I was like, well, maybe, I'm not saying it wasn't because of your encephalitis, Mom. And I've only known you post-encephalitis. I didn't know you when you were 4 years old, before you got it. But I can promise you, from what I've learned about neurodiversity in taking these kids into all these appointments and talking to their caretakers and so forth, that you, Mom, are very neurodivergent. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I can't offer you a diagnosis, but I can tell you you're real different from a typical person, And the same was true of my dad, and even my father-in-law, my wife's father, whose wife, my wife's mother, is a therapist, is a marriage and family therapist who only just retired after a 30 or 40-year career. He was inspired by our kids getting neuropsych evaluations to go in and get a neuropsych evaluation himself and learn that he is autistic, and was really thrilled to have that information. So the first thing that happened was it made me really reevaluate my own family and what had gone around me in my childhood. Helped me understand My oldest getting diagnosed certainly helped us understand the very different ways that neurodivergence expresses itself in our middle and youngest children. Like it really changed the way I think about thinking. And it also led me to recognize, I think in part, why I have always been so happy and comfortable in the comedy world. The comedy world isn't for everyone. People imagine, I think, that comedians are always sad, like there's that sort of sad clown thing. And I don't think comedians are particularly any more sad than other types of performers, right? Like I think there's probably a hole in the center of anyone who has a career just tries to get attention from others. But like I don't think comedians are naturally sadder than actors or musicians. But I do think that comedians are a very special and unique group of people. And that is what drew me to them. The things that are special and unique about their brains are what allow them to do comedy and what keep them interesting to me as a person to hang out with and spend time with. So I started to see the ways that my friends in the arts were different in their brains. And obviously neurodivergence takes many forms other than just autism. But I saw all of those things in the folks that I know and love and whose art I respect really deeply.
That's a really great approach, and that's why I love doing what I'm doing, talking with people. I grew up with actors and musicians and comedians, because it's great to see what goes on in their mind when they create and how they work to tailor it to an audience. So I highly respect that. Speaking of an audience, my next question for you is: what are some misconceptions people in entertainment still have about autistic individuals or neurodivergent people more broadly?
I mean, I think this is true of people, especially but not exclusively neurotypical people through all fields, but it's certainly reflected in the entertainment world that the idea of what autism is limited to kind of two lanes, one of which is a nonverbal autistic child, and that is seen from the outside maybe as just tragedy and not much else. More recently, thanks to certain smash hit podcasts that the names of which shall not pass my lips, maybe a combination of tragedy and magic powers, he said angrily and sarcastically. And the idea that those same nonverbal autistic kids, they can't even imagine them as adults. You know what I mean? But then I think the only other idea of autism that people have is kind of, that kind of, oh yeah, math genius, talk your ear off about their obsession, like the kind of pop psychology understanding of very classic level 1 autism. And certainly there are elements of that are reflective of the experience and profile of a lot of autistic people, but it's the thing that the idea of the autism spectrum, I think, was invented as an effort to explain to people or give people the language to understand the idea that autism wasn't a binary thing, where you either are 100 autistic or 0 typical. But I think that the piece that, and it has been successful to some extent in that effort, but I think the greater thing that is the next level of understanding, I think, for people, especially neurotypical people, but also, autistic people who are, early on their journey of self-understanding, and of understanding their peers, is that autism spectrum is not on one axis. That, I have 3 children who are autistic, and their differences from neurotypical people are in completely different areas between the 3 of them. They have not just very different personalities like anyone's 3 kids would have, but they're also, I'll put it in quotes, but autistic in different ways. They just have very different profiles. And so we are still, I think, as neurotypical people or relatively neurotypical people, coming to terms with the idea or wrapping our heads around the idea that autism is a sort of umbrella term for a whole range of differences, which are not the same amongst all autistic people. They're not expressed the same amongst all autistic people. Some autistic people may have a greater, one of my children needs a lot of proprioceptive input and is really into flinging herself into the wall, right? And one of my children also is calmed by repetitive physical behavior, but she likes to pace while dragging her feet. And one of my children likes to jump on the trampoline. Those are all physical needs that are typical of autism, but they're all very different forms, and they're all very native to my very different 3 children, So the idea that autism isn't just this specific set of things that is either turned on or turned off, or even a spectrum from left to right of amount of those things. It is a bunch of bands like the graphic equalizer on a home stereo. It is all these different forms of difference that even I, as a person I've never done a neuropsych, but I'm guessing I would not be evaluated as autistic. But even I was like, oh wow, my auditory sensitivities are really different from my wife's. My ADHD tendencies are ones I really share with this kid, but not that kid. And so understanding that it's a web of expressions and differences from neurotypical people rather than just an A-B thing is the thing that they don't get in show business, and frankly is hard to find even with folks like the principal or the vice principal of a public school.
Exactly, and I think that's a very powerful way to close us off. I really liked that piece of advice you gave. It's like the bands of a home stereo autism. You just have to be patient. Anyways, that's going to do it for the thing, you guys. Thank you so much to Jesse for coming on and sharing his perspectives. If you guys want to see more amazing interviews, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Autism Digest channel. Our latest issue, centered around the arts, is out now. If you guys want to see these amazing stories spotlighted, including one with a parent who happens to be in entertainment as well, go to autismdigest.com to get your issue, and stay tuned for the audio file of this interview to be posted on our Spotify. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.